This is Never Found, where we uncover the world's most haunting, unsolved mysteries and real life disappearances. Stories that still echo with grief and demand answers. In the story today, we take you down one of the loneliest roads in Canada, the road that swallowed lives and answers. This isn't just a road, it's a long, quiet path that cuts through deep forests and heavy fog. At night, the headlights of cars look like tiny spotlights shining into the unknown. The trees feel like they're watching, still and silent, like they know something we don't. And when the mist creeps in, the highway turns strange, like a place between here and somewhere else. It doesn't just go through the land, it pulls people in, and sometimes they don't come back. The highway we will talk about today is over 700 kilometers of wilderness where indigenous women, girls, and yes, men and boys too have vanished without a trace. It's the Highway 16, popularly known as the Highway of Tears. And for decades, listeners, families have been searching for loved ones who never came home. This highway stretches from Prince George to Prince Rupert, cutting through northern British Columbia. Trees line both sides, mountains loom in the distance. But what looks like paradise from a postcard has, since 1970s, held a very dark reputation. They started calling it the Highway of Tears after so many indigenous people went missing here, mostly young, many hitchhiking, because there is no other way to get from one place to another. The road isn't just remote, it feels haunted. Thick fog rolls across the winding road. Gas stations are few, cell phone service even rarer. And at night, the headlights are cutting through nothingness. And a lot of truckers say they have seen shadows on the road where no one should be. The sinister feel of this highway was so real, listeners. It inspired the 2015 documentary Highway of Tears, directed by Matt Smiley. It also partly influenced fictional accounts, including episodes of Unsolved Mysteries and the eerie tone of series like True Detective, with vast, empty roads hiding chilling truth. These aren't just Hollywood shadows, they echo what families here have lived through. Officially, there are 18 cases. Unofficially, try 40, maybe 80. And thus, these are just the ones we know about. Let's talk a bit about the victims. Let's talk about Jessica Patrick. She was just 18 years old, a Wet'suwet'en. A Wet'suwet'en refers to the First Nation people in British Columbia in Canada. Jessica was a mother. She disappeared in August 2018 after a night out. 2 weeks later, her father Mike, he got the call. They found Jessica's body off a mountain road. She had been left wrapped in a sleeping bag. Her remains had decomposed beyond recognition. The father had to drive her home in a steel casket because her body was severely damaged. And as the procession moved down the highway, thousands stood on the roadside in silence. One last tribute. Or let's talk about Ramona Wilson. She was just 16. She was heading to a graduation party in Smithers, but she never arrived. 10 months later, her body was found in a forest near the airport. Her hands had been bound. Her sister Brenda still walks the highway every year. It's called the Ramona Lisa Wilson Memorial Walk. She walks for Ramona and for all the girls whose names we may never know. Then there is Alberta Williams. In 1989, Alberta vanished after a night out. Her body was found dumped near the highway, assaulted and strangled. The case went cold for years until a retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer publicly named a fellow officer as a suspect. Still, no charges were ever filed. Another victim, Tamara Chipman, 22, a fisherman's daughter. She was hitchhiking home. That was 2005. No trace of her has ever been found. And we must mention Ronald Jack, his wife Doreen, and their 2 sons. An entire family gone. Disappeared in 1989 after Ronald received a job offer. They were last seen in Prince George. No trace has ever been found. And there's also the case of Ale Sarek Auger's brother, Laurent Leslie. Laurent was just 15 when he was found murdered in 2010 near Van der Hoof, close to the Highway of Tears. Though his case resulted in an arrest, it added to the devastating toll of young, indigenous lives lost along this corridor. Each name echoes through the trees, a silent question. Why? So there were some investigations that were run in 2006, as late as 2006. The Royal Canadian Police formed Project EPANA. It sounded promising. It was a special task force to investigate these cases. But decades later, only one big breakthrough. DNA linked an American convict named Bobby Jack Fowler to the murder of Colleen McMillan. Fowler was a violent career criminal and a drifter with a long sheet of assaults, kidnappings, and attempted assaults across the US and Canada. Some officers cared, others not so much. One Royal Canadian Police officer was overheard saying, "If they're natives, nobody gives a hoot." Indigenous communities have long said what the rest of the country is only starting to hear. These victims weren't lost, they were failed by the system, failed by silence. Mothers like Matilda Wilson, who searched the woods herself when her daughter Ramona went missing. Fathers like Mike, who had to bury his daughter Jessica in a steel box because the animals had gotten to her first. And sisters like Brenda, who keep walking the road year after year, not for closure, but for justice. And maybe to keep the next girl or boy from disappearing. Activists like Gladys Radek, who lost her niece and now speaks at every memorial, every inquiry, her voice cracks, but it never breaks. She says, "We scream for justice, but we scream into the wind." You want to know why this happened? Start with no public transportation. Kids hitchhike because they have no choice. Then you can add in poverty, isolation, and finally a history of systemic neglect. Many of the victims were traveling to school, jobs, or simply to visit family. And they were picked up by people who took advantage of the isolation and silence. The silence was really deafening. Of course, there was the aftermath. In 2016, Canada launched a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. The final report used the word nobody wanted to hear: genocide. A deliberate pattern of violence made possible by decades of neglect. They issued 231 calls for justice. Some bus routes have finally opened. There are some cell towers that are going up. But for many families, it's too little, too late. As with every other story, there are controversies, there are speculations. One of the biggest controversy is the Royal Canadian Police's inconsistent approach. Families report cases where officers have delayed investigations, they have dismissed missing reports, or they have even blamed the victims. She probably just ran away, many were told. Could a serial killer have been operating along the highway for years? some believe so, especially because of the pattern of victims and similarities in the cases. But others argue it's not one monster, but a system that led many predators thrive in silence. There are also whispers about truck drivers, maybe some transient workers, and even known criminals passing through. One man, if you recollect, we had said earlier, Bobby Jack Fowler, he was connected to one murder, but could he have been responsible for more? The Royal Police never said for sure. Some say the real culprit is systemic neglect. Because if these victims were living in Vancouver or Toronto, would this many disappearances have been ignored? So where do things stand today? As of 2025, listeners, most Highway of Tears cases still remain open and unsolved. Project Ipana still exists, but its activity has drastically reduced due to funding cuts. There were no publicly named suspects beyond Bobby Jack Fowler, who died in prison in 2006. Investigators continue to re-examine DNA and the old evidence, but advancements have been very slow. Families say they are still waiting, not just for answers, but for commitment, for someone to truly care. There have been recent improvements, I must say. There are expanded transit options, there are more police and community liaisons, there is an improved 911 access along the highway. But advocates insist these measures are reactionary, not preventative. Many families continue to call for a new, fully independent review of all the cases, and some have even launched their own grassroots investigations. In December 2024, Rogers Communications completed the installation of 5G cell towers along the Highway 16, closing about a 166-kilometer coverage gap. It's a start, a signal in the darkness. But do not forget, the highway is 700 kilometers long. And I don't think it will bring back the victims. So the Royal Canadian Police's Project Ipana still operates, but remains under-resourced. No new arrests have been made. And the families? They are still waiting at the roadside, holding signs with names the world forgot. As long as the people are still vanishing, the story is not over. The last reported homicide along this highway was as recent as 2023. They were daughters, they were sons, sisters, brothers, mothers, maybe fathers, and they were loved. We owe them more than memories. We owe them answers. This was never found, where the missing are never forgotten. If you were moved by today's story, share it. I always say, someone, somewhere, always knows something. And stay tuned. In our next episode, we will uncover another gripping case that left behind more questions than answers. And until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never stop looking. Thank you.